Good morning. Since we have no disagreement, maybe we should stop talking, because you guys have agreed with me that perhaps the most important driving force of the contemporary world into the 21st century is the information or technology, shifting from the Industrial Revolution to the network revolution. So I believe that we'll be in good shape. By the way, one of the purposes of this morning's session is for you to find your own position in the world. And this seating couldn't be better because this is the shape of the world. I have never spoken in a place like this. I have to worry about people on this side and the other side, but this is exactly the 360 degrees borderless world. And by the time you finish this conference, if you could find your own position in the world, on the global map, Quebec's position in the world, Canada's position in the world, or wherever you come from, we're in good shape. To sort of start this process of where we have come from, where we are going to, I think it is best for us to talk about the coming shape of the economy, the borderless economy. President Clinton was in Tokyo yesterday, and he made a very important announcement, as many of you heard. And that is he has finally found a way to balance the US budget. You don't believe this, I don't either. But he said that the first series of bonds he's going to issue is Stephanopoulos bond, no maturity. And this is a good bond. Next one is Al Gore bond, no interest. And finally, his own bond, Bill Clinton bond, no principal. And like many other nation states, the government all over the world keep issuing bonds. They have learned this very bad habit of borrowing from the future because they don't have to struggle with today's constituencies. This is one of the most tricky things that you can fall into, because like Japan, 75% of the GNP is already borrowed from the future. And why? Because politicians love not to confront with the people, not to confront with the problems. They keep giving. The central government has become the agent of redistribution. They have forgotten that somebody will have to make wealth. But because they have taken wealth generation for granted for so long, they have become the agent to redistribute wealth. Japan has run out of wealth. You've heard of Japan, industrial machinery, etc. That was 10 years ago. Now we've run out of our wealth, and nobody is addressing this issue of how can we live in the 21st century. Canada was one of the richest nations on earth. And you seem to be running out of your wealth, and you are now talking about how to distribute. So you have to help the fishermen in Nova Scotia, and you have to help the farmers in the Midwest, etc. Who is creating the wealth? And at the center of this is this notion of the nation state. Because nation state, which is a very responsible unit, feels that they have to help the weak. They have to help the less blessed. But if you do so, then those people sit there, expect the distribution. Look at the Japanese rice growers. We are about 10 times the cost of production of rice in Australia. There is no hope that with a landmass, so limited landmass in Japan, that our farmers, despite all this massive billions of dollars of subsidies, they will ever reach a competitive situation in the world. We can import land by asking farmers around the world to help us develop the kind of rice that we like. Singapore, food is far less expensive than in Japan, simply because they have no farmers. They have no farmland. So what's the purpose of farming? Well, think about this. You know, if I hear that Canadian salmon is now imported from Chile, I have to wonder the same thing. And we have exactly the same situation all over Japan. I was talking with Mickey Kanta, the US trade representative until a week ago. Now he is the Secretary of Commerce. 2 years ago, about the US-Japan trade imbalance problem. And I told him, look, we have now built so many plants, automobile plants in the US, and silicon chips are now produced in the United States, so take it easy. This will disappear. The trade imbalance will disappear. And then he said, oh, that's the best news, so we have to make a big issue about it. Those who laughed are qualified to be a good politician, because that was exactly his point. If it disappears naturally, why don't we make it a big political issue so that the two heads of state can shake hands and say, we reached the agreement. Lo and behold, trade imbalance disappears, 36% improvement over last year, to our credit. You see, if it's a real problem, they stay away. And that was the purpose of Mickey and Bill Clinton visiting Japan, to make sure American people, the voters, understand this. That's why he's got 100 journalists with him. He had more time for press interview with American journalists than with the Japanese press. You see, it's all domestic consumption. And that's the nature of the problem. These people are still living in the 19th century. Remember, toward the end of this last century, there was a guy named John Maynard Keynes. Those of you who studied economics at school all learned the Keynesian economy. And now, that's the only sort of economics our politicians know. They love to spend taxpayers' money. But let's go back to that sort of framework and see whether or not that kind of thinking developed for the nation state, the closed economic model, still holds water. If you want to stimulate the economy, you would use taxpayers' money for public works, right? A la New Deal. You build Tennessee Valley, you build highways in Hokkaido or bridges in Okinawa, right? We have found this to be the most inefficient way of using capital, and yet they love to do it. Voters love it, the bureaucrats love it, right? Now, let's assume that Canada does this. Where does the supply come from in the borderless economy? If the demand increases, do you think the supply will come from within Canada? Do you think the demand for the United States, the supply will come from within? Absolutely not. If you stimulate the economy, supply comes from elsewhere. Okay, and that's the very nature. Therefore, the supply, which is usually linked with a number of jobs, it's never taken place over the last 10, 15 years because of the permeability of the borders. So using taxpayers' money, you're stimulating somebody else's economy, only to increase the importation, unless you have domestically very competitive industries, because consumers have the say-so. And they have the ultimate choice. And all the supplies may not come from within. That's not the fault of Professor Keynes. It was, in his days, the model, the nation-state model, which prevailed in those days, which also prevailed in the United States around 1925, trying to come back from the ashes of that Great Depression. You know, stimulating our taxpayers' expense was a good idea. Second problem is this. If you want to increase the supply to catch up with demand, and if you are a manager, you want to have a